The man with the dark glasses. Before everything fell apart, before the fear, before the years of questions that never found answers, I used to think my dad was invincible. The kind of man whose confidence could fill a room long before he walked into it. I grew up believing he was the wealthiest, smartest, most bulletproof man alive. And honestly, for a long time it felt true. Back when we lived in a cramped little terrace house in Liverpool, Dad already drove the best-looking car on the entire street. Even as a kid, I noticed how neighbors would pause just to watch him pull up. That made me feel proud and a little special, especially considering where my parents came from. Both of them grew up in conditions so rough they barely spoke about it. The kind of poverty you had to see to fully understand. Maybe that's why Dad became obsessed with money. With earning it, saving it, showing it. He was sharp, top of his class, every teacher's favorite student. Everyone assumed he'd pick a respectable trade, become a lawyer or a banker. Instead, he shocked everyone by saying he wanted to go to university. But then, after a trip to London for an interview, he came back with a completely different plan. Something none of us could have predicted. He wanted to start a business. Not just any business. One that dealt with antiques from behind the old Iron Curtain, Russia, back when it was still the USSR. I didn't understand the details back then, but I remember him telling friends that the right connections could turn months of paperwork into a simple handshake. And somehow, God knows how, Dad found someone on the inside. A man in Russia who could open doors most people didn't even know existed. Whatever Dad did with that contact made him rich fast. Faster than any of us were prepared for. One day we were living in a tiny terrace house, and the next we were moving into a massive place in Halewood. New schools, new friends, new everything. It was overwhelming but exciting. But nothing prepared us for the day he announced we were moving again. Only this time, we were leaving Liverpool entirely. He sat the family down at the kitchen table one evening and said he'd saved enough money to fulfill his dream. A quiet life in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. A farmhouse. Land. Fresh air. Simplicity. We thought he lost his mind. We begged him not to do it. My brother cried about losing his scout group. I cried over my boyfriend and my friends. Mum flat out refused at first. But Dad wasn't joking. We were moving, and he had already begun selling the house to pay for the new one. Within weeks, we were driving miles into rural Scotland, watching the world become more empty, more quiet, more unfamiliar. Water-eyed, our new home was beautiful, yes. But it was lonely. Small. Stuck in time. No cinemas, no arcades, no noise. Just silence and endless fields. Still, over time, we adjusted. I started making friends. Went for long walks on the beach. Found a favorite cafe in the nearby village. And slowly, life began to feel less strange. Until the day it happened. I was sitting in that cafe with my friend Nicola when she leaned in and whispered, "Don't look yet, but that man over there keeps staring at you." My stomach dropped. Nicola was calm, pretending to sip her tea, but my pulse was racing. I turned slightly, just enough to glance over my shoulder. A man stood by the counter. Dark hair, black jacket, sunglasses, indoors, on an overcast day. He wasn't just glancing. He was watching me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was a tourist. Maybe he mistook me for someone else. But the way he stared made my skin crawl. When Nicola and I left the cafe, I prayed he'd stay put. He didn't. We walked down the narrow lane toward the bridge. Then Nicola stiffened, turned her head, and whispered, "He's behind us." I felt every instinct scream run. And before I could react, Nicola spun around and shouted at him, calling him a creep. Her voice echoed off the stone walls. But the man didn't say a word. He just kept walking straight past us. Like we were invisible. Like the shouting meant nothing. And yet the silence, that cold, blank expression hidden behind the sunglasses, was somehow so much worse. We waited in the cafe for nearly an hour before daring to walk home again. Nicola eventually went her way, and I headed toward the bridge alone. And that's when I saw him again. Standing beside a car in the small riverside parking lot, staring directly at me. Only when I got home and told Mum what happened did her expression shift from annoyed to quietly worried. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for how Dad reacted when I told him. Because for the first time in my life, I saw fear on his face. The smile that shouldn't have happened. Dad's reaction haunted me more than the man with the sunglasses ever did. I'd expected anger, shouting, maybe even a call to the police. But instead, he froze. His face drained of color. He wasn't furious. He was terrified. He asked me question after question, his voice trembling in ways I had never heard before. What did the man look like? What kind of car was he driving? Did he speak? Had he followed me before? Was I absolutely sure it was the same person? The more I answered, the more unsettled he became. By the time I finished recounting everything, I was sure he'd grabbed the phone. Instead, he just stared into the distance like he was trying to solve a puzzle only he understood. Dad, I whispered, shouldn't we call the police? He didn't reply. Mom stepped in, her voice sharp and accusing. What is going on with you? Why are you acting like this? It's a grown man stalking your daughter. But Dad didn't even look at her. He buried his face in his hands and let out a slow, heavy breath that made my heart pound. I'd never seen him break before. Not once. Not ever. Mom and I exchanged a look, hers confused, mine terrified. Then Dad suddenly snapped out of his trance and ordered me upstairs. And take your brother too. Stay in your rooms. His tone wasn't angry. It was desperate. My little brother barely noticed anything. He was glued to his computer, playing some game. But I couldn't sit still. I crept halfway down the stairs after only a minute, just enough to hear my parents whispering intensely in the kitchen. Mom's voice was panicked. Dad's was low, shaking. Then the arguing started. What aren't you telling me? Mom demanded. You know something. You know something about this man. Keep your voice down, Dad hissed. You think I don't deserve the truth? It's not like that. Then what is it? Dad didn't answer. I leaned closer, trying to catch whatever came next, but before I could make out another word, the doorbell rang. A sharp, single chime. My stomach dropped. I backed up 3 steps and pressed myself against the wall, hardly breathing. I felt my pulse thudding in my fingertips. Dad's chair scraped against the floor. Mom whispered, "Who could that be at this hour?" Dad didn't answer as he walked toward the front door. I heard each slow, hesitant footstep. A pause. Then the metallic click as he unlocked it. He opened the door halfway. Silence. Terrifying silence. Then Mom asked, "Who is it?" Her voice wavered. Dad didn't reply. Not immediately. Not until Mom's voice sharpened into something close to fear. "Who's there?" When Dad finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Nobody," he said. But there was something wrong with the way he said it. Something hollow. Mom pressed further. "What do you mean, nobody?" Dad shut the door. Hard. Locked it. Double-locked it. Then slid the chain across. He stood there staring at the wood as if he expected it to dissolve. "It must have been kids," he muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. They must have run off." Mom didn't believe him. Neither did I. Dad turned off all the lights downstairs. Every single one. The house sank into darkness. He told Mom they were going to bed early, but he didn't come upstairs until long after she did. When he finally did climb the steps, he checked on my brother, then stopped outside my door. "Stay in your room tonight," he whispered through the wood. "And keep the blinds closed." His voice shook. I didn't sleep. Not even for a moment. The next morning, he acted like everything was normal. Sat at the table. Drank tea. Read the paper. But his hands wouldn't stop trembling. Later that day, Mom confronted him again. This time, she didn't yell. She just looked at him with tired eyes and said, "You know him, don't you?" Dad didn't deny it. He didn't say yes either. He only said, "We need to be very careful." That was the moment everything changed. After school, Mom insisted on picking me up, even though she hated driving in rural areas. She waited outside the gates, gripping the steering wheel like she thought it might disappear. I climbed in, confused and frightened, and asked what was happening. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed locked on the rear-view mirror. Then she whispered, Your dad told me something last night, something about his past. Something he's never talked about. I felt sick. What do you mean? Mom swallowed hard. The man who followed you, she said softly. Your father might know him. And if he's the man your dad thinks he is, then we may all be in danger. My entire body went cold.
Why?
Who is he? Mom shook her head. I'm not allowed to tell you. Not yet. Her voice broke. But your father is terrified for a reason. When we pulled into our driveway, Dad was already standing outside, waiting for us. His face was pale. His eyes were sunken. He looked like someone carrying a secret so heavy it was dragging his soul to the ground. And before we even stepped out of the car, he said one sentence I will never forget. He's back. The truth my father tried to bury. Dad's words hung in the cold Scottish air like a threat we didn't fully understand. He's back. Mum gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. I felt frozen in the passenger seat, staring at Dad as if he were a stranger. The man who used to seem so strong, so unstoppable, now looked small, fragile, scared. Mum stepped out first. Tell her, she said quietly, not looking at him. She deserves to know. Dad closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and motioned for us to come inside. My brother ran past us on the way in, oblivious, humming some video game tune. He had no idea our lives were splitting open at the seams. Dad sat at the kitchen table, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was praying. He didn't lift his head when he spoke. I wasn't always in the antiques trade, he began. At least not the way you think. My heart pounded. What does that mean? I whispered. He rubbed his face, as though the truth tasted bitter. The man following you, he continued. He isn't a stranger. He isn't a tourist. He isn't some random pervert. Dad swallowed hard. He's someone I used to work with. Someone dangerous. Mum crossed her arms as if bracing herself. I could tell she'd already heard parts of this the night before. Dad looked at me, and the fear in his eyes nearly broke me. Back when I was starting the business, when I went to Russia for the first time, I didn't just meet an antiques dealer. I met a fixer, a middleman, someone who handled problems for people who had money but no patience for paperwork or laws. The room felt suddenly colder. His name is Victor, Dad said. I didn't know much about him at the time, only that he could get anything from anywhere for the right price. He helped me move the artifacts. He helped me build my fortune faster than I ever imagined.
He paused.
But I didn't know who he really was until it was too late. Mum stared at the floor. She didn't interrupt. Dad continued, voice low and shaking. The Soviet Union fell apart around that time. A lot of powerful men lost everything: money, position, influence. Victor wasn't just helping me import antiques. He was stealing them from people who had no idea. Wealthy families. Corrupt officials. Criminals. People who were suddenly desperate. I felt the blood drain from my face. And they wanted revenge. Dad nodded. I told him I didn't want to be part of anything illegal. I tried to break ties. But he didn't allow that. Men like him never let anyone walk away. He clenched his fists. One night, he showed up at my hotel in Moscow and told me that if I ever crossed him again, he'd come for me. And not just me, my family. My heart thudded painfully. Dad, are you saying he followed us here? After all these years? Dad whispered, yes. The room began to tilt. Mum grabbed my hand under the table. I thought moving to Scotland would hide us, Dad said. A quiet place. A fresh start. I thought Victor had bigger problems after the Soviet collapse. And for years, we were safe. He looked at me with eyes full of guilt. Until you saw him. The memory of the man in the sunglasses flashed through my mind. The way he watched me, followed me, smiled at me. That horrible smile. What does he want? I whispered, though part of me didn't want to know. Dad exhaled slowly. When I broke things off with him, I took something valuable. Something he believed was rightfully his. Mum looked up sharply. You told me it was just money. Dad shook his head. It wasn't money. A cold, eerie silence settled over the room. What was it? I asked. Dad hesitated for a long time. Finally, he answered. A list. What kind of list? A list of names, he said softly. People Victor and his employers were targeting, tracking, or exploiting. If that list ever resurfaced, it would destroy powerful men. Men who relied on Victor to keep secrets buried. I felt sick. So, you stole it to protect people? No, he admitted. I stole it to protect myself. As leverage. Insurance. Mum closed her eyes in disgust. Dad continued, but Victor must have found out I kept a copy. And now he wants it back. Or, he wants to make sure I never use it. My voice cracked. What does that have to do with me? Dad looked tortured. Because he knows the easiest way to break a man is through his children. A knock suddenly echoed through the house. A slow, heavy knock. All of us froze. Dad's eyes widened, filling with dread. He found us, he whispered. The knock came again. Then a man's voice, calm, muffled through the door, but unmistakably familiar. We need to talk. Dad stood up slowly, trembling. And that was the moment I realized the past my father thought he had escaped had finally come home.